Okay, great, thank you. So good evening, everyone. My name is Amy Skillman, and I am the director of the MA in Cultural Sustainability here at Goucher College. And I'm so pleased to welcome you to the first session in our chatFEST series of online conversations with sustainability activists. And I'd like to begin, first of all, by thanking Amy Millen and Cecilia Ottenweller, who are my colleagues and my sisters in crime, or perhaps my sisters in style. But anyway, they helped to plan this series. We've had a blast over the last several months designing these conversations. Both, just thinking about speakers and putting speakers together in interesting combinations. And we hope you'll be able to join us for all four of them. The next three are scheduled for every other Wednesday from tonight at 6:30 Eastern Time through June 14th. And Amy Millen is going to drop the link in the chat where you can register for the remaining ones if you haven't done so already. And I think also she has a PDF that describes them in a little bit more detail. So first of all, some quick reminders. We do have closed captioning. There should be something at the top of your screen that enables you to open it, or you can go to the three dots at the bottom of your screen and open closed captioning. We are recording this session so that people who aren't able to attend can listen to it later. If you're not interested in being recorded, simply mute your video for the duration if you like. We ask that you please keep your microphone on mute, the usual Zoom reminders. And you can put your view setting on speaker view if you like, until we open everything up for questions and comments from all of you at the end. So these events are designed specifically as conversations with some opening remarks by our speakers and then a moderated conversation or moderated discussion. We called it chatFEST so that you would feel encouraged to communicate with each other using the chat function. So feel free to chat away. And in fact, if you like, why don't you go ahead and begin by chatting something about who you are or where you are or whatever you would like to sort of introduce yourself to the group. In the meantime, I'll get us started. The concept of sustainability foregrounds social movements around the world. We understand sustainability as fulfilling the needs of current generations without compromising the needs of future generations and ensuring a balance between economic growth, environmental care, and social and cultural well-being. And obviously tonight in particular, cultural well-being. Put simply, sustainability is the ability of people and the natural world to coexist equitably on Earth over time. But lately, the processes of climate change, war, globalization, and gentrification all conspire to threaten this ability. And yet resistance to sustainability goals has risen, often seen as conspiracy for taking away freedoms or property rights. Communication is critical if we're to move beyond that fear and toward more sustainable ways of being together on the planet. chatFEST builds on ideas and conversations from our 2022 International Conference on Communicating Sustainability, and I think some of you attended that conference as well. And so this series is designed to create conversations with artists, scholars, and community leaders, all exploring innovative and diverse ways to communicate the value of sustainable practices. Tonight's theme, communicating the value of culture, we believe that paying attention to culture is critical in all sustainability efforts. So we've brought together prominent thought leaders for a conversation that explores how to talk about culture in a way that makes a difference, that can really make a difference. So Heidi Lucero is our moderator. She is an Indigenous anthropologist and professor in the Native American Studies Department at Cal State University, Long Beach. She's a descendant of the Juaneno band of Mission Indians, Acjachemem Nation, and the Matsun Ohlone tribes of California. She currently serves as the tribal chairwoman for the Juaneno band of Mission Indians, Acjachemem Nation, working to assist her tribes in reviving traditional cultural ways and asserting Indigenous identity through traditional tattooing, which was the subject of her capstone when she was a student in the graduate program here at Max. She's also working to gain federal recognition for her tribe, and she might talk a little bit about that challenge tonight. Halle Butvin joined the Smithsonian Institution Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage as Director of Special Projects in 2016, following 3 years as an advisor at the Smithsonian's Office of International Relations. She's responsible for expanding the reach of their cultural sustainability work around the world and is actually joining us tonight from Tunisia. She is involved in designing collaborative projects to support communities, safeguard their heritage, and promote cultural expression and elevate cultural practices to improve local economies. Eugene Rodriguez is a third-generation Mexican-American. Received his master's degree in classical guitar performance in 1987. In 1989, he formed the youth group Los Cenzontles in San Pablo, California. And then in 1994, he incorporated Los Cenzontles Mexican Arts Center to broaden the work and primarily as a cultural response to urgent social problems in a community being remade by immigration. And Amy Kitchener then joins us also from California. We have 3 speakers from California. She co-founded the Alliance for California Traditional Arts, also known as ACTA, in 1997, understanding California's unique position as the nation's epicenter for diverse cultural and multinational communities. ACTA's work has focused on social change through grant making, capacity and leadership development, technical assistance, and bilingual program development. She's trained as a public folklorist with an MA from UCLA, yay, go Bruins, and has piloted participatory cultural asset mapping in neglected and rural areas of the state and consults with other organizations and across sectors on this method of discovery and the inclusion of community voices. So that's who is with us tonight. And now I'd like to turn it over to, let me pull up my screen, pull you guys back over to here, and happily turn it over to Heidi for our conversation. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. And take it away, Heidi.
Welcome, everyone. So I think we're going to start off by each individual member that's speaker here to give an introduction about the work that they're doing. And I think we're going to start with Haley.
Thanks, Heidi, and hello, everyone. It is 11:30 where I am, and I just got here a couple days ago, so I hope that I'm going to be as articulate as I would like to be, even though I'm quite sleepy and jet lagged, but I am really excited to be here and to be part of this panel with you all. I guess I could start. I want to thank Amy for the introduction, because it gives a little bit of background. If I think many of you will be familiar with where I work, the Smithsonian Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage. We're most well known for our Folklife Festival annually that we put on the National Mall in DC, as well as Smithsonian Folkways recordings. And then our archive is also a really important repository. We actually have the biggest digital collections at the Smithsonian. The program that I run, which is called the Cultural Vitality Program, is really based in sustainability efforts. And over 50 years of festival making at the center, really trying to answer the question of how we can work with communities outside of these kind of the production cycles of our record label and festivals, really recognizing those challenges that Amy was speaking about earlier, that really, whether it's climate change or oppression, economic instability, political instability, things that force people to question, whether continuing their cultural heritage and assimilating or having to leave their homes, which is something that we're facing here in Tunisia. So the program, the Cultural Vitality Program, the idea behind it is to create opportunities for Smithsonian to partner with communities that are trying to bolster their cultural practices, their language, to really pass it on to the next generation. And our hopes in doing these projects is also to be able to share outcomes. We do a lot of evaluation, and actually having Amy Kitchener as a part of this conversation is great, because I've been following, there's some really great evaluation work that I think ACTA has done looking at the impact of these types of programs and how do you evaluate them. So what I just want to mention about the work and maybe kind of frame it from the perspective of where I'm sitting right now in Tunis is about the reality that there are not a lot of resources to do this work. I think we all work in the cultural sector, and it can be extremely challenging to find resources to be able to do this work and to support and to be able to support communities. And so my background before joining the Smithsonian was actually in international development, which is a space that is really, there are aspects of it that focus on a lot of different realms of stability in communities, but a lot of it does have to do with economic development. And so there are millions and millions and millions of dollars spent every year. USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development, is the part of the U.S. government that distributes these funds around the world. So again, this is outside of the United States international projects. But the work that we're trying to do is, because I have that background and those relationships in international development, the idea is culture is a big part of this. And what I was seeing also in economic development programs is that it was often ignored. And culture bearers often were not a part of these types of programs. It was very much focused on commerce. And USAID in recent years, seeing that tourism, for example, is a great opportunity for economic development, they started investing heavily in the sector. And so at Smithsonian, about 7 years ago, we started piloting a model that's research-based, that essentially puts ethnographers, folklorists, together with culture bearers in the communities where we're working for dialogue, and to give communities and culture bearers an opportunity to present their cultural heritage and to earn income from that by engaging in tourism in a way that is presenting a first-person narrative. And so we piloted this model in Armenia, and we ended up having an Armenia Folklife Festival as well as a piece of that. And that's what I'm doing here in Tunisia. We had workshops in January with about 300 culture bearers all over the country. And now we're doing a program, a one-on-one mentorship program. We have a scientific committee with local Tunisian scholars that are going to be working with different culture bearers, musicians, cooks, artisans, storytellers around the country, and together conceptualizing tourism experiences that will become a part of the offer for when visitors come to Tunisia. So it's a different kind of approach to doing this, but recognizing that part of sustainability is dependent on livelihoods and trying to understand how we can kind of take these resources from projects like this and be able to work with communities to pilot these types of projects and evaluate them and see if increase in livelihoods really does actually carry into our goals of passing cultural heritage to the next generation and building more resilient communities. I think I will leave it there for now because I'm excited to hear from others and have a conversation with you all. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Haley. I really like that idea of livelihoods. I think that in my own community, we see a lot of individuals that are not passing on culture because they're more focused on making sure that they are, keeping the lights on and paying the rent. So if there's some type of initiative that includes livelihood in reviving culture, I think that's definitely a wonderful opportunity for things like this to continue. So we'll have a little bit more talk about that when we go to our question and answer period. But next, we're going to hear from Eugene Rodriguez.
Oh, thanks so much. I'm Eugene. I founded Los Cenzontles as a youth group in 1989. I incorporated the nonprofit in 94. We are now a nonprofit run by young people who began as students. They now run the program, the administration, and the faculty and board members as well. Sustainability is a really big word. It's a complex concept. I've noticed that sometimes consultants really see sustainability only in financial terms, but that's really a weakness, very business oriented perspective. I believe that sustainability is about balancing the interests and needs of a large group of people, those people being our staff, our faculty, the artists we work with, our community, our children, their parents, our donors, our members, and each of them come from very different backgrounds. So in terms of how we use culture, we don't think of culture, or I don't think of culture just simply as the trappings of culture, but really the functions of culture. Why do we play music? Why do we make art? And it's really in that examination that we've developed our pedagogy. We've taken rural traditions that were traditionally practiced over over lifetimes really, and we've created pedagogies that modify them, fuse them for a modern world to work with urban children. We have responded to changes in the neighborhood. There have been waves of different Mexican immigrants from different parts of Mexico, many of whom bring their own traditions, very different from the 10 years before that we have always tried to stay open and responsive to. I'm sorry, there's kids over there playing and singing and dancing, if you can hear that. Hopefully it's not getting in the way. And then reaching our donors is a whole nother kind of cultural package. We've noticed that typically people who are major donors, people who have a lot of money, may not have as much interest in huapangos or in traditional mariachi as our community does. So we make alliances with people who are more in the Mexican American, in that part of the diaspora, people like David Hidalgo, Los Lobos, Flaco Jimenez, Linda Ronstadt has been very supportive of our work. And so really this whole sustainability has been it necessitates understanding how dynamic and how diverse our ecosystem is, and really kind of knowing where to draw those the resources, whether it's our kids or whether it's money or whether it's parental support or guest artists. They say that my grandma used to say, cada cabeza es un mundo, every head, every mind is a world. And when you look at a community filled with minds, it's really a universe. And recently, a friend of ours, a filmmaker, was marveling at how we can continue to make films. We've made 20 films so far about our community. She was asking how I keep on coming up with ideas. I said, well, if you know your community and you know how they're responding to the changes around us, there's no end to stories. So it's really that level of, we're calibrated at that level of personalization. You know everybody in this organization, and every child that comes in the door, we see as a prospective teacher or someday my replacement. So it's that level of intimate knowledge of our community and our cultures that we've been working on. And so yes, sustainability, a huge issue here. Where we just created the 10-year plan. I just turned 61. We have 10 more years on the lease. I'll be 70 in 10 years. So we're thinking, how do we transition to further a leadership team model, which also is part of the sustainability picture. I think it's really important to see organizations as organic. Human beings have life cycles, organizations have life cycles, and we should recognize that. I've been dismayed by this kind of dominance of corporate mindsets in the nonprofit sector. And I really feel that we need to acknowledge the humanity first of our institutions, and that the way we do our work as institutions needs to reflect what we're doing, which is culture, which is dealing with people. So that's 4.5 minutes worth. I'm happy to talk more a little bit later.
Thank you, Eugene. I think that modeling this type of leadership that you want for younger people, younger members of your community, is something that all organizations should look to, is creating a good model for them to take over. I'm sure not going to be here in 30 or 40 years, so we need to train the younger children, the younger generation. And when we talk about Native American communities, we always look 7 generations into the future. And so being able to create that model, I think, is something that we need to look forward to. All right, Amy Kitchener, your turn.
Hi, thank you, Heidi. Can we have the PowerPoint, please, Amy? As there's some background noise here. I'm wondering if that's interfering at all.
I'm not hearing any.
Okay, good. Okay, I want to share some info about a project that we've been leading over the last few years called the Taproot Initiative. And it's been a national planning effort that we started in the end of 2020. And part of this was really about case making, and especially to philanthropy, about what the value of folk and traditional arts is. And, you know, a lot of people in this room, you know, have thought a lot about this over time. And part of this is also trying to understand the gap in funding that we see for traditional artists and organizations, and trying to really understand why that is so, you know, compared to the rest of the arts. And so so we did a research project that was really about centering the role of culture bearers in their communities. And we had 3 co-authors. It was me and Lily Karazi and Dr. Shweta Saraswat Sullivan. And we worked also with Dr. Maribel Alvarez as a thought partner. And we contracted 15 culture bearers and field activators from around the country to also really center the key themes and approach to this. Several National Heritage Fellows and others known for their leadership. So the next slide, please. We love this metaphor of the taproot, borrowing from botany, but we're describing a community's central cultural root growing down to a considerable depth. And this root is spreading a network of smaller root systems. So for us, a community's cultural taproot is comprised of ancestral knowledge and practices that embody the shared values, aesthetics, memory, language, and sacred knowledge. But it's also centered in future thinking. As a source of knowledge, the taproot is an essential means by which communities build collective power, engage in healing, and strengthen their identity. We define taproot artists as those traditional artists whose work directly relates to the care and repair of a community's cultural taproot. Next, please. This representation on the map gives you an idea of the geographic spread of our interviews, representing urban, rural, island, and mainland perspectives. If you check out our appendix and the report, you can also see that we are working to represent a broad range of ages, gender, identities, religions, and arts practices. Next, please. Just a snapshot at some of the research domains carrying forward our taproot metaphor. we were really trying to understand what are the soil conditions, that work is happening in. And one of the things that really emerged in the interviews validates a lot about what we knew to be true going into this process. And you can read for yourselves some of these themes that were uncovered. I think a very important factor in the research has to do with the historic moment we've been in, with the pandemic, the violence, the deep questioning, and it really shaped our conversations. And so, we saw really coming out of what are the soil conditions, for the taproot of community knowledge, acknowledging the past historic injustice and trauma were at the very fore. But I also just want to say that, obviously, or, that we also want to say that joy and resilience and deep community knowledge and wisdom are very positive and powerful assets amongst many others that also permeate and nourish the soil. The care activities, the idea of, what is the work? What does the practice of traditional arts do for your community? And understanding, the ways in which this work can build collective power, engage in healing and others. And then the gardeners, who engages in taproot care and repair. This is about identifying the ecosystem ranging from individual culture bearers to community organizations or knowledge centers like universities, service providers, and funders. Next, please. Then we looked at the tools and supplies. What are the practical implements to get at what sustainability for these practitioners is built on? Asking what supports your work, what stunts it, and what does sustainability require? A frequent response is flexible operating support. And then looking at scale and trying to understand how people are thinking about scaling their work. Is it broad? Is it deep? What do they consider their metrics of success to be? We know that that cultural sustainability organizations are often small budget, often $25,000 or less. However, their impact is often outsized. And so we are thinking about scale that's different from, bigger is better and is truly rooted in a relevant scale of community impact. Next, I just want to point to we also commissioned some quantitative research by Dr. Carol Rosenstein and her colleagues, looking at the scope, finances, and funding of living cultural heritage organizations operating as nonprofits. And I'm going to breeze by any detailed data now, but just to note that we do not have a lot of national structural data available in our sector. And that's why I think this research is important, in part to identify what we might consider the tip of the iceberg, and that there are 7,250 nonprofit, ethnic, cultural, and folk organizations in operation through the US. And also, importantly, that 70% of these have budgets of less than $25,000, underscoring the lack of investment by philanthropy. Next, please. So coming out of our research is a call to action around these four broad areas. And I'll just say them here in their broadest of terms, and we spell them out with greater specificity in the report. But number one is about investing in taproot artists and culture bearers, and bringing resources for people and communities to dream big and take their work to what they imagine as an effective scale. It's also about investing in organizations to sustain the taproot ecosystem, raise the visibility of the field, and then also updating data collection and research infrastructure. I mean, part of the reason we don't have robust data is because of a lack of investment. So just look, one more slide. I'll close by sharing a major development coming out of this research is the investment by the Mellon Foundation, granted $5 million to ACTA to support a Taproot Artist and Community Trust, which is a 3-year initiative to support individual culture bearers, traditional artists in their communities. And basically, it will provide multi-layered support for accomplished traditional artists, deepening their existing work, sustaining or scaling up the reach of their work within their communities, and also boosting capacity, whether it's an individual artist or part of a collective effort. So, and some will be making 50 artist fellowships of $50,000 each over the 3 years, plus having an additional pool of funds of $10,000 each that each artist can direct to an activity or home organization, along with peer learning and mentorship and public visibility, documentation, and an impact report. So we're right now in our design phase, and we're looking forward to coming to our first cohort of Taproot Artist Fellows by the end of 2023. And then the last one is the report, and I'll put the link to the report here in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I love the visuals of this idea of a taproot, and how we're all, these culture communities are linked together through that taproot. Myself as an artist, when Amy Skillman first opened up, she talks about, some of us are artists, some of us are scholars, and some of us are community leaders. I myself happen to be all 3 of those. And so, looking at a visual like that and learning how you can, pull members of your community in just by using a visual of how we're connected to that taproot system is something very important, and something that I'm definitely going to bring back to my community. But when we're talking about things like artists, my particular art in tattooing is something that has been quite often seen as a negative, that has a negative stigma attached to it. When I decided to do this revival of this tradition as part of my capstone, I did it as with a very specific reason and very important intent, is that when I tattooed my face, my mother stopped talking to me for 5 years. She couldn't, she didn't understand why I did it, how I did it, what was the reasoning. And it really is about reviving this really important icon of cultural identity. And so my first question is going to be, is that, why is it important to highlight all of this cultural work? I know why it was important to me, but, why is it important?
I can speak to that. My own personal journey has been that the work has been my own cultural reconciliation. I'm 3rd generation. It was my way to, doing this work has been my way to connect to my grandparents. But for my community, I want to make it very clear. I think the reason that we've been successful for 35 years is that we have a very open approach to culture. We do not tell children who they are. We don't tell children who they should be. We give them the tools to find out for themselves. I find that identity is one of the most personal things that we can do. And I think that's been very successful. We don't politicize children. A lot of youth programs politicize children. We don't do that. We don't project any outcomes on how they should use the arts. We just try to do our best to teach them the skills with rigor, which also is very important, so that they can make their own connections throughout their lifetime. So I think that's been an important value for us.
Anybody else have any, comments on why it's important to highlight this type of cultural work?
Well, I'll say also personally, I'm a folklorist, and I was really drawn to this work through different experiences I had that had to do with sharing culture across different racial and ethnic communities. And I was a student at the University of Arizona. I was one of Jim Griffith's students at Tucson Meet Yourself. And it was what I could see is what it was a powerful place for sharing. And for it's also a mirror to your own identity. And so, you know, for me as a white woman from the East Coast, folklore and family folklore has been sort of a way for me to understand the assets of my own family and community and stories. And I do believe that, you know, it's a way of making meaning, and it's kind of has a glue factor wherever it is. And I think our work at ACTA over 25 years has been about, you know, trying to spread that glue and also like innovate in areas where maybe culture wasn't part of the program. And so, you know, we've done a lot of work over time that is about putting culture into health and into health and systems change around healthy communities, and finding partners who also believe that. But I think one of the things that we've learned in that work is that unless you've had some kind of experience where you've kind of had that visceral experience of like the power of your own culture or experiencing it, it's like what our dear colleague Maria Rosario Jackson used to call the get it meter, you know, so part of that is making and helping facilitate more opportunities for people to have that firsthand experience.
Yeah, I think after 5 years, my mom finally, you know, registered on the Get It meter. Yeah, and now she is my biggest fan, my biggest supporter. So yeah, there's definitely that type of radar. Haley, did you have anything to comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add I'm delighted to learn about the Taproot initiative, and I can't wait to dig into that report and learn more. And I love that. I also love that illustration so much. And it really resonates, you know. I think like the commitment from Mellon with those resources, like at the end of the day, I really do feel like in the experience that I personally had of working in a lot of different countries with a lot of different communities, there are culture bearers who are doing incredible work. And even in, you know, at 25, where $25,000 would feel like all the riches in the world to be able to fulfill their dreams. And so I think any way to be able to drive resources to people, to be able, because one of the things that I think, and in the hindsight, the Armenia program that we worked on had a really long life. We just closed it in December of 2021, and it was 7 years of work. And so we were really able to see transformation over time. And the different culture bearers that we worked with through that program, they already had ideas of, it wasn't about Smithsonian's approach or anything like that. It was just like kind of acting as a facilitation to drive resources to people that didn't have it before, to these culture bearers. And what we saw is that they turned around and then, you know, they did tourism experiences, but at the same time, they started offering things for kids in their communities. They were able to take on apprentices. Their kids suddenly also were interested because they saw, oh, there's like people coming and visiting my mom and dad. And now suddenly like, I think I'm going to do the social media, and oh, maybe I'm actually going to learn a little bit more about what they're doing. And so I think that it's really about the resources going into the hands of the culture bearers as much as possible. And I think in any creative way that we can come up to do that. I love that research resulted in that award. So congratulations. I like really cannot wait to see where that goes.
So we've all mentioned children, you know, and children being an important part of this cultural work that we do. So how are you getting children involved in this cultural work? And for me, it's always been a challenge, especially with everything, everyone having, a Game Boy or a tablet. How do we move them away from those things, those devices, and really get them involved in this cultural work?
Well, my organization is entirely run by children who grew up. Fabiola and Lucina joined me in 1994, 1995 as 15-year-olds. They had recently come to the country from Mexico. We now have Berenice, who is 24. She started here when she was 7, went to UC San Diego, graduated and came back to work. Now she's working full time. Nesta Velasquez is joined us when he was 17. Now he's 28 and working full time here in production and in music. This is something that we've always done. There have been many other young people who ran the program throughout the years. That is really what we do. And it really can't be overstated how much they've done. They're the ones who are creating the pedagogy with me. They're the ones doing the research. They're the ones who study with the elders. They're the ones who teach the children what the elders teach them, because elders in our community who teach these informal, as we call them, traditions, are not really teachers. They don't really break it down for the students. They say, watch me. And so our older young people did that work, and now they kind of have turned it into methodology for the younger children. And let's be honest, it doesn't get easier with the advent of social media. The children are very distracted. And so it's a struggle. It's a constant reinvention of the methodology. We're constantly in contact with where the kids are. The pandemic was very disruptive. But I would like to mention that because our methods involve working with almost all siblings in a family, like we'll have 3 to 5 to 6 siblings from the same family who take classes here. During the pandemic, we were able to form family groups that could practice at home, and we would work with them on Zoom, and then we'd send out a camera crew and record them on their front porch with social distancing. So the methodology that we've created over the years kind of proved to be our saving grace during the pandemic to get us through. But it's also been a challenge to convince philanthropy, because philanthropy sometimes often sees the world with a very different lens. So we've had to convince people of the manner in which we work. We've had to try to prove that. And we've done that through documenting our work. We've done that through, we've done 35 recordings, we've done 20 documentaries, we've done hundreds of music videos, constantly trying to prove the value, not only of our community, but also of the traditions that we're representing, which are often neglected and maligned.
Eugene, I'm really curious with the filmmaking efforts that you're doing. Have you found that that's another pathway for young people to get interested?
We've tried, yeah. Well, we've tried to do production classes. It's never been completely successful, honestly. So in a way, and the reason we got into production, I've always been documenting. We've always had a camera and documented. But when the California Arts Council was defunded in 2001, 2002, 25% of our income was gone. So at that time, luckily, the James Irvine Foundation opened up their new initiative, which was to reach underserved areas of California, recognizing the changing demographics and the rise of digital technology. So we were able to get funding from the Irvine Foundation for over a decade, which we turned into basically making a case. We were able to keep our program local, which I think is very important because culture is often very local, but we were able to tell stories that would make a larger impact, bring in other resources, and also hopefully inspire other neighborhoods within this country or in Mexico even. So that it almost became a split world. We have our vision is intensely focused in our neighborhood. Most of our students live within very short driving distance of our school, but our reach through technology, our digital technology, is global.
I just want to comment about Eugene and Los Cenzontles. I think what you've done there, Eugene, is so important, and the scale that you've been able to reach. Like I was talking earlier about how a lot of culture bearers and their organizations, have nonprofits, but they're small budget. You are not a small budget nonprofit. In fact, you have made your work so visible and valued that even Mackenzie Scott noticed and wanted to support you. And it's just a really incredible accomplishment. And I think that you and Los Cenzontles offer like a model of what can happen. You know, like we shouldn't settle for, you know, having a small budget. We should have big dreams, and you've created a pathway and a model of
Well,
what's possible there.
Well, I appreciate that, Amy. We've always tried to you know, assist other neighborhoods as well as we can. In fact, when right before Irvine was completely divested from arts and culture, we were helping to consult other organizations, other neighborhoods, develop locally sourced cultural programs. And so that was a really promising program that just kind of lost funding altogether. But I think that you know, it's true that our budget is well over 25,000, but we always feel like we're a small organization because you kind of have to work overtime no matter what, because you have to make that case when there's so many biases in the world. And you know, but again, to me, the biggest resource that we have are the people, and the people that we've invested in, and who really, and many of whom have invested their entire lives with us. So going back to the idea of supporting people, supporting community, livable wage is so important to me. It's something that's sacred, really. So this is the things that keep me up at night and keep me working 7 days a week.
I just wanted to add, Heidi, to your question about youth engagement, that I do think that there are so many aspects, even to what Eugene is talking about too, and in our experience with working with different individuals and organizations, is that you need both things. You need to get young people interested. It is extremely difficult to battle those social media, but there's a few different things that, you know, at the center and through our cultural vitality programs, we're doing a language lodge right now, which is a social media challenge, specifically directed at young people who are working on language programs in their communities to, you know, work with a script, to be able to kind of meet each other and network with each other through sharing their approaches. So I think that there are, you know, the other thing I'm thinking about is our Mother Tongue Film Festival and support for Indigenous filmmakers and media making. So I do think that there's looking at something just fell outside. I'm not sure what that is. Looking at Indigenous filmmakers, that, you know, that there's a space also for creative industries. So not forgetting that, looking at folk and traditional arts, but also looking at graphic design, at photography, at documentary filmmaking in those fields. I'm just gonna make sure everything's okay outside. Sorry.
You know, there's one thing that I'd like to say, kind of little big picture, and it's really kind of what compels me these days. I really think that traditional arts are key to somehow to maintain our human sovereignty in the face of corporatism, in the face of AI, in the face of you know, this kind of fascism overtaking the world. I think that, you know, so much of our kids will always embrace corporate culture. We can't avoid that. That's just, you know, not always a bad thing. It just is. But it's really what's in our garages, what's in our kitchens, which are our tool sheds, that gives us a sense of who we are. You know, we can't just relegate that to the Dia de los Muertos aisle at the department store. I'm not against any of that stuff. However, we need to, and there's so many forces in the world that tell us we're nothing in order to sell us a sense of identity. There are forces in the world that tell us that we're lonely and isolated so that they can sell us a sense of connection. And I feel like our folk arts really are the oh, what's the word? It's like the, you know, the stem cells. I feel like folk culture is the stem cell of what we need to grow from. It's the best arts education for children, you can turn into a jazz musician, a classical musician, but if you start with the folk arts, that is the best education. And by the way, the reason I kind of have these thoughts on top of my head, I just wrote a book, and I'm hoping that the book will also help encourage these ideas. These ideas are represented in my book, and that's what my new calling for evangelism. Evangelical calling.
So we've talked about all of these positive things that are going on in our communities and the wonderful work that we're all doing. Let's kind of turn this a little bit and talk about some of the barriers that we run into. I know that for myself, gentrification in my particular community is really huge. And so what are some of the barriers that you guys have run into in doing your cultural work?
Well, just not to dominate the conversation, but the barriers are everywhere. I'm sorry to say it. The biases that are barriers are everywhere. And I mean, just last week, we did some shows for local city government who do not support us at all. And they treat us like we're, nothing. And they're very disrespectful. And I don't want to sound negative, but the barriers are everywhere. In philanthropy, it's you're either too big or you're too small or you're too this or you're too that. It's always something that you're not good enough at, and it's very, very challenging. That said, like I said, like if you don't sleep at night, then you can just always try to find some door that's open. But the barriers are massive, and honestly, we recently had to fill out some application for a very large grant, and we had to discuss or convince them, how we were affecting systems change. We live in a poor neighborhood that by its very nature is designed to be unstable. We live in the shadow of Chevron smokestacks. We live in unstable land. The children go to poorly funded schools. And somehow these people wanted us, a little nonprofit, to affect system change. To me, what that told me is that what they really wanted to do was fund a large institution. Because yeah, large institutions are much more prepared to affect system change more than us. But I truly believe that if every neighborhood in this country had a center like ours based in local culture, that would be system change. But alone, we can't do it. So the barriers are massive. And I feel like we haven't even begun to have the conversation on how to address it, to be quite honest.
I was just going to add, well, that sort of those challenges was central to the idea of the soil conditions that the taproot is living in, right? And so, and how does the taproot facilitate care and repair, right, in around these challenges? But what I want to just kind of sustainability writ large is one of the biggest challenges. And we are in like a parallel process to a lot of the groups and culture bearers that we work with, trying to figure out how to sustain an organization that is about sustaining culture and tradition, right? And what I'm seeing now, I could resonate with what Eugene was saying about, you're too big, you're too small, you're too this, you're too that, you're not good enough in philanthropy. And the other aspects that, especially now, is about, there's a lot of volatility, like there's in funding, and that funders just seem to be changing from, well, we're not doing that anymore. Our new thing is this. And the speed of change has ramped up. So I'm seeing a lot of things that are just, especially after the pandemic and around kind of rebuilding and all of that, they're like one-time things. And so there's like, it's like gather your acorns while you can, or it's like a one-time thing to get this, but then what? And so what I want to do is I want to weave back, one of the things that really intrigued me was what Haley was talking about, and the work that you're doing is also about, economic sustainability. And so I think, it's certainly not going to be philanthropy that's going to sustain this work. It's going to be a lot of different things. And it does come back to people's livelihoods. And I would just also pose the question, Haley, too, about, are there promising kinds of models that you've done with the international work you've been involved in that you think could be applied here in the United States?
Absolutely. Can you still hear me okay? Okay. So I want to say first on the barriers topic, and then come back to that real quick, Amy. Even with the programs that we have, I will say that I really empathized with Eugene and some of these demands, because even taking the place of Smithsonian advocating to do this work, there's a lot of like, oh, we like having the Smithsonian on this proposal. But then when we get into implementation, this is not fast work. There's no such thing as low-hanging fruit, which, I still end up going in there and dealing with people that kind of have this like management consultant speak that, appreciate that this work has shown impact, but don't want to wait for what's required. And it requires that kind of asset mapping, of that really careful time of relationships, of patience, of understanding that some things aren't going to work and that you've got to work with models, even getting resources to people in communities. You can't use regular administrative systems, and you have to understand why people may not trust, and don't give up on them. And so that kind of battle is like, I do feel like I spend a lot of my time fighting administrative battles, even to be able to get money to where we want it to be, because they just want to go to folks that are already commercial, already doing things. They're, which is like helping the same people who've always been helped. In terms of models, I'm very excited because this, specifically in this tourism piece, we have our first opportunity actually to work with communities here in the United States. So we're starting a program. It's through pandemic relief funding. Appalachian State University in North Carolina received a large grant and partnered with us to be able to bring this model to, I think it's 5, I don't know how many counties it is yet, but it's 5 different regions that are underserved in rural North Carolina. And so for the first time, we're going to be able to bring this approach and work in the US. And I think it definitely transcends. It's extremely relevant. It's just been, in some ways, one of the downsides of this and the barriers is we can't always work where we want to work because we have to find funding to continue to do our work. And so we've had to be opportunistic. And that's where I happen to have these relationships internationally, which has brought in a lot of new projects. But I'm really excited that we're going to be able to start doing this work in the US.
Thank you, Haley. And thank you, Eugene and Amy, for all your wonderful work that you're doing. And, the pros and cons of what works and what doesn't work. I think now we're going to go to some of the other people that are involved in this meeting, and so that they can ask their questions. So if you have a question to pose, please put it in the chat, or are we allowing them to open up their mic, Amy?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. But we do have a question in the chat from Jenna. Jenna, do you want to ask it yourself, or you want me to read it?
I can ask it. Thanks, Amy.
Sure.
So I've really enjoyed seeing everyone's work, and I'm so inspired and encouraged. I've been having a hard time with that recently, so I'm really glad I attended this. And so one of the things is I'm working on developing personal consulting in cultural sustainability assessment and monitoring with communities on collective culture, and then also on traditional practices. I'm working with Pennsylvania Council on the Arts right now to pilot these and see how they actually go in real world occasions. But one thing that I've really been struggling with, and I just did my taxes, so I was having kind of a little bit of a meltdown, but it's convincing people that the benefit of cultural sustainability. And a lot of times people, it comes with, and the well-being of communities and, our cultural heritage and humanity, all these things that are really important to us and to communities. a lot of times people don't think it's as important as like, environmental sustainability or economic sustainability. They want to relate to it in the impact of sustaining culture in dollars. And the only way I've kind of been able to do that is I think about, okay, so if we assess the sustainability of a tradition, we monitor it, if we, implement some supportive practices, supportive projects, we can do the assessment again and see the impact of it. And so then maybe next time around, this project will get more funding because they'll see it made a big impact. But I don't know if there's any way that we can make it more direct to show the connection between cultural sustainability and other forms and the success of other domains of sustainability. That's my question.
It's a tough one.
Well, yeah, it really is. One of the things that I was talking with someone about was like showing how understanding culture, local culture, and inviting the community to collaborate in like other forms of sustainability could be a way of preserving resources, finances that way. I just feel like we don't have a lot of like direct evidence of like tying to everything else where people are like, oh, okay, yeah.
Well,
trying not to sound like
it seems to me that there have been a number of initiatives to try to show the economic impact of the arts, and it's kind of a similar question. And to be honest with you, I'm just tired of the question. I feel like the cultural. I'm so not. It's not like a personal thing about this in the situation, but like I don't think about it anymore because the same thing is with the arts. Oh, does it help math skills or does it help? I just feel like I'm just tired of those questions. It's like, isn't it enough when you look at the power of music, the power of art, the power of dance? Isn't it so obvious? Why do we still have to measure it against economics and academics? It just doesn't seem, at least at my scale, it's something that I don't even entertain anymore. We don't even put it on our donor letters. Oh, our kids are doing great in school. They are, but I don't really want to go there. I'd rather say, look at the beautiful things they're doing.
I totally agree with that. It's just as far as getting paid to do the work, it's not.
Well,
I totally
in.
agree with you. That's why I do this work and everything. It's just trying to kind of, all right, how can I get paid to do this and eat while at the same time achieving my, those goals and
I just want to jump into this question. Is that okay?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Because
I was going to say there's also it's not about necessarily making like an instrumental kind of argument about the value of arts and culture. I mean, we can look at culture and heritage practices as something that is so necessary to all these other domains. Like it's a very Western idea that we separate education from health, from all of these different domains. And so I think part of what we can offer in cultural sustainability is a through line to all of these kind of comprehensive impacts. And I think that's what we've been seeing. I like those economic arguments of the arts are so, I agree, Eugene, like they just are not compelling in so many ways because the arts do so many other things better than other economic things. But I think we're at a point in time where there has been a lot of research, and especially in health, of like having like positive health outcomes that relate to we worked with Dr. Sergio Aguilar Gasiola at UC Davis from the Center for Reducing Health Disparities about 15 years ago. And he had done the largest study on Latino mental health in the United States. And one of the things he found was that immigrants coming from Mexico who stay connected to their culture and their language had a major protective factor against depression. And so, you know, there are lots and lots of studies that can show those things. But I also want to just say that I think it's important that we can hold up that the comprehensive values of arts and culture and even quantify them according to different domains.
Yeah, I'm glad, Amy, that you mentioned the connection to mental health, and I'm hoping to see more of that. And I'm curious too. It's not an answer for you, Jenna, unfortunately, but I'm hoping that we had evaluation, and of course our donor was really only interested in the economic impact of the work that we were doing. But with our research partners from Armenia, we're trying to go back and look kind of 5 years on since we did the Folklife Festival program with all of those stakeholders, of really understanding and doing deep interviews with all of them on the different facets of the program and the impact it's had. But one of the things that I do think, just from anecdotally, is that when you're making that kind of investment and again, driving resources to communities and specifically to culture bearers, there is a shift that we saw in terms of connection to place and that rootedness in terms of like really people kind of making the connection through the work. And again, a lot of this is through oral history interviews of like realizing like I've been baking bread for generations, but it wasn't until they had an opportunity to talk with an ethnographer to really understand the significance of what they were doing. And now if you go back to those bread bakers and ask them if they would ever imagine leaving that practice, they would say like, absolutely not, no way. I'm doubling down on it and I'm never leaving this village because of this reason. And so there is this also like really deep connection to environment and appreciation for environment that I think does come out of this interaction. And I'm convinced more than ever that the piece here that is the most important thing is the opportunity for that dialogue between the ethnographer, folklorist with the culture bearer, because that is where all the shifts happen. That's where that recognition, that confidence, that piece of well-being also is like being seen by another person and ask those questions, being able to see yourself in this context. That is, I think, where we're seeing transformation, but it's also a space where I think we need to be doing more research and evidence that's documented to be able to kind of showcase that.
I'd like to also say that a really important core value, almost above all, is independence. I think the power of folk arts is that it provides us freedom, in our minds at least. And we're not attached to a corporate, larger structure. There's a lot of individual community, there's a lot of freedom in that. And I remember, I don't know, 10 years ago, before redevelopment was eliminated in California, the city here in San Pablo wanted to build us a very new, very nice building. We're in an old strip mall right now. And as a condition, we were basically told you have to provide entertainment every weekend or something like that. And in retrospect, thank goodness that didn't happen, because I think it would have really sapped us of our spirit and our strength. So when people talk about like the economic advantages of the arts, I automatically feel like someone is about to put their hand in my pocket, because once they see there's money, then they're going to want something from us that we're not going to want to give them. It's like in this neighborhood, there's a lot of break-ins. People will break in next door to Smart and Final to steal their Red Bull or whatever, or steal liquor at the liquor store. But they don't come here because they don't figure there's anything valuable. And to me, that's great. If we're invisible to that mindset, then we can protect our autonomy, we can protect our spirit, we can protect the work that we do. So in a way, I'm kind of happy to be outside of that manner of thinking. We have that luxury.
I put something in the chat. I don't know if any of you have seen the Wallace Foundation report on arts learning, and I was reading it the other day, and it's really interesting because it gets at this idea of understanding arts learning as way beyond, as actually connecting to community, creating strong relationships within communities, building building opportunities for youth to grow up and actually be part of community. You know, very different from arts for art's sake or arts for building careers or that kind of thing. So I thought that was a really interesting report. I just wanted to put in there. And then Heidi, Heather, you had a question in the chat. I want to make sure. Did you want to ask it?
It was really more riffing off of what I was hearing. And Eugene, congratulations for getting the attention of Mackenzie Scott. But just thinking, I think it was Haley maybe who had said something about people getting it. And perhaps our job is to help bridge that understanding between these communities we're working with and funders, perhaps. You know, maybe there's an opportunity there to be thinking about shifting the paradigm of what funders pay attention to and how much agency, and I think I'm borrowing Eugene's word there, the communities might have when their projects are funded. And how can we facilitate that new paradigm shift? And just to share an example, back when I was doing a lot of work in facilitating digital story workshops, I noticed a real difference between the workshops that were funded and that had, for lack of a better word, an agenda, a purpose, a need to report back stories and outcomes to the funders versus the workshops that were community-based or led or public workshops, where those workshops functioned more along the lines of almost therapeutic community building experience for the participants. And so I think a lot, and having also been a fundraiser for, gosh, like 20 years now, I think a lot about what constraints funders have on our work and where our role might be in changing that narrative. So I don't know that I'm asking a question so much as just, what do we do?
Well, I have a very big mouth. I talk to our funders very candidly, politely. I try to be polite, but I think it's my sacred obligation to communicate to funders about the realities of our circumstances. And I don't think things will change unless we are all candid. And so, I mean, sometimes it feels like a risk to do that, but I think overall, it's really the thing we have to do, just to be candid.
I love that. Yeah, thanks.
Amy, do we have time for one more question, or are we just?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's take one more question as long as Halle has the time to stay awake for another question. I know it's very late for you, but yeah, is there another question?
Cecilia, you have a question in the chat. You want to open up your mic and
Sure. Thank you very much for calling on me. I'm glad we got time for it. I'm just curious about, what kind of an effect would happen if we turned the spotlight away from nonprofits having to demonstrate our effectiveness within our communities or our worthiness for existing, and instead turn it around and look at philanthropists and funders and actually examine what their practices are and how much of an effect they've had within their work. And it just kind of, there was an article I posted in Max Solfam, our internal Facebook group yesterday, about the rise in suicide in nonprofit workers and people who are working in nonprofit field, because of how frustrating it is, how low paid they are, how little opportunity there is for, really seeing a huge benefit of the work they're doing. And yet within philanthropy groups, you're talking about with the really huge funders, like here in Houston, we have, the Houston Endowment, we have the Cockrell Foundation, all kinds of big family foundations. And everybody who works for those foundations are extremely well paid. So there's a real imbalance, I think, in just the worldview, and as well as the power position of those two groups. So how is it that on a public way that lens can be reversed? Is it more storytelling?
One little story that I have is one foundation liked one of our employees so well that they recruited her, paid her much more money than we could afford. And I was really ready to propose to that every time a foundation poaches one of their grantees, that they pay, you know, $10,000 to that foundation, to the nonprofit. Wouldn't that have been courteous?
Yeah. Heck yeah.
But it has long been my fantasy, because I hear from a lot of frustrated program officers, because they're also feeling, you know, the changing needs in the field. It's long been my fantasy that we have 3 questions on a proposal. You know, what are you proposing to do? What are you trying to do? You know, what are you trying to fix or whatever? You know, demonstrate your capacity, and what do you need, and what do you need it for? 3 questions, and that's it. I that would make me very happy if we could just kind of filter everything down to the basics instead of all these jumping through hoops. Yeah.
Amy Kitchener, you just put something in the chat. There was the link of grantadvisor.org. Yeah, no, this is too cool. I can't wait to dive into that. And one of the things that I've had discussions with back when I ran a nonprofit, I'm not doing that right now, but with potential funders, I was approaching people who were within, you know, in Houston, a lot of the older families are the ones that have the money that do the donation to causes. And I was in the history realm. And I found myself telling them, you know, one of the things that you're going to have to face is that Houston is a bellwether for the rest of the country. We have 149 languages. We're the largest multinational metroplex in the country. And that the legacy of the people who, quote unquote, founded Houston is going to be in the hands of people who don't look like them, do not come from their culture, do not have the same beliefs as they do, and have had a totally different experiences they have within the city. And I think that that's true for the, you know, all of us working in the field, that this is going to change. We're not immortal, and it needs to change. There are different people coming in with different ideas and ways of doing things.
Well, on that note, I want to thank all of our speakers for today, Amy Kitchener, to Eugene Rodriguez, and excuse me, did she disappear? Haley, did Haley?
Here.
Oh, there you
I'm
go.
here.
And Haley for joining us. It was wonderful hearing from all of you today, and join in for the next chatFEST. I think there's a link in the chat to sign up for any of the other of the speaker series, and I hope to see you then.
Yeah, the next one is May 17th, and the topic is comics, comedians, and public art, new formats for communicating sustainability. It's going to be really fun.
And thank you,
So-
Amy Skillman, Amy Millen, and Cecilia Ottenweller for, you know, putting things together. We appreciate it.
Well, Heidi, thank you so much for moderating today. Appreciate that. And Amy and Eugene and Halle, thank you so much. It was really great to hear your thoughts. And Carolyn, it's great to see your kids and your puppy dog.
They're excited to see everybody. So
Yeah.